Right. So we missed Tuesday. What I'm going to do probably on Tuesday is I usually talk about paper two a lot in class. I probably won't do that and just convert it to a video because that's a video I know you'll watch. You don't have to worry about getting your notes. We have to spend time going through all that. So I'll do that. As far as which companies, I'll probably have them on Monday. So I give you a couple weeks to write the paper, which for paper two is really all you need. I have so many choices. So probably what I'm going to do in the video is show you how I get the data off of Bloomberg because it's really useful to be able to do that and what data sources are. But there's a lot of companies. This week was a heavy week. Tesla, Netflix, Procter & Gamble, Philip Morris. There's several, and they're having some pretty radical reactions. Philip Morris down through almost 3%. Procter & Gamble. That must not have been in. I can't remember which one was it. Tesla. How did Tesla do today? Is 9% a big day? Is there any stock where 9% is not a big day? It's a pretty big day, right? Tesla's been in the news quite a bit. So pretty big adjustment. Netflix, I think, was actually doing really well earlier today. Is that a big day? 16%? So that's a pretty interesting one, right? The market's down almost 2% or down 1%, and Tesla's up 16. That's going to be, you're probably all going to write about Netflix because that's going to be a pretty big story. What news did they get today that would have caused that? And you can definitely see it in the numbers, can't you? Even if you do year to date, you can see that big jump. It's still not at its high, but Netflix CFO says company has long runway and margin growth. Netflix is doing some interesting things. They're starting to do, it's kind of scary that Google and some of these other firms and Facebook, these firms are starting to do advertising. Everybody can't do advertising. I think sometimes we think, wow, they're doing advertising all this revenue. Well, the total advertising budget is going to be about the same. It's just who gets it. So if Amazon starts doing advertising, Hulu, Netflix, they all start doing advertising. That's less for Meta, that's less for Google and others. So we already know the newspapers have been wiped out. I don't know what, I don't know if I haven't had a TV in some time, but there's still advertising on TV, right? Yeah. In fact, some channels, that's all there is. So Netflix had good, so there's some really good stocks to talk about. So I'll show you how to get the data. Bloomberg is really helpful with this paper, but I'll actually pull the data for you and get it in a big file so you can pick your company. And then you just find articles, and they're pretty easy to get articles. You just do Netflix earnings report. Even when you mistype it, it will come up. So Hollywood Reporter, news about Netflix earnings. There's going to be a bunch of articles for you to quote from. Look at some interesting charts. What is Netflix's big things? So I was a big fan of Netflix earlier. When they started doing production, that made me really nervous because that's a lot of money, billions of dollars. And what do all that billions of dollars get them? So Disney spends billions of dollars on Toy Story. The first time out, what do they get? They get people going to theaters, then they sell it later. They got all the toys. What does Netflix get? They don't lose customers. Get the same, whatever, $15 a month, but they may pick up some new customers. It's not the same as Disney doing Toy Story, is it? So to me, I'm trying to get that math. While you're spending all these billions just to retain the customers you have, and your competitors are doing the same thing. So I don't quite get the math on that, but some reason the market loves it. And one thing I love about Netflix is how they're always thinking the next thing. They're willing to cannibalize their own business to get to the next thing. I mean, to me, it's amazing that Netflix is called Netflix because they weren't on the internet when they started. They were mailing out discs to everybody around the country, and yet their name was Netflix. You can see how far ahead they were. At that time, you couldn't do movies online. It was too much bandwidth and all that. So they named themselves not about their current company, but about their company 10 years later. That's a pretty impressive firm. So, Ford didn't name themselves EV auto manufacturer back in 1920 or whatever. All right. So I'll get those companies to you. There's going to be some really interesting ones. All right. So we were talking last time, we got a little further, but I'll repeat some of this. We're talking about beta. Beta is a really, really important number for measuring risk. We'll talk about how it fits in the CAPM. But the theory of beta is that that's the relevant measure of risk for your stock. Not total risk. Remember, total risk is standard deviation. But about 20% of the risk of the stock is tied to the market. The other 80% is idiosyncratic. It disappears when you diversify your portfolio. So beta should be the only part of risk that you care about. And so how do we figure out beta risk? Well, you got to first figure out what kind of company you have. Do you have a cyclical company or a defensive company? It's usually tied to the economy. Not always. We saw bank stocks have been doing pretty well. Bank stocks actually don't mind these higher interest rates. It's pretty amazing when you look at the 5-year treasury, it's over 5%. And yet very few banks have 5-year CDs that are over 5%. Why would anybody buy a 5-year CD at 4.8% when they can buy a 5-year treasury at 5-point-whatever percent?
Ease of access. Ease of access.
Yeah, the CDs are easier, right? You have to have a brokerage account to set up the CDs. So banks are getting away, and then banks have a huge advantage that they're FDIC approved. Would you have a 2% or 1% savings account at Frost Bank if there was no FDIC? Would you buy a 4% CD from Frost Bank if there was no FDIC? No way, right? You probably want 7-8%. So that helps them a lot. So they're subsidized by the taxpayers quite significantly. So they're doing well right now when everybody else is worried, because interest rates is a macro factor, but it affects banks very differently than other people. Inflation the same way. I listened to, and I hope you're still listening to Business Breakdown. I heard 2 this week. They were really, really good. But one was a fleet car manufacturer, and they're talking about what inflation does to them. So when inflation's higher, they may actually make more money, even though people buy less fuel. The cost of fuel is more. So it's a volume versus price. So if the price is up and volume's down, it really depends on the interchange. And when the price is down, volume may not be up that much. So they may actually benefit from inflation, whereas a lot of firms are harmed by inflation. Obviously, this week, we're seeing a lot of geopolitical events. No one's even talking about Putin anymore, right? So he got off the calendar. All this stuff is just hitting us all at once, trying to figure out what that means for your company. Oil prices, they didn't shoot up to 110 today. I don't know where they are today. Someone have to tell me. But, you got a conflict in the Middle East. You would think that would have a huge, huge impact. So everything gets affected a little differently. So that's what I think one of the weaknesses of CAPM is. Stocks are hit by systematic risk very differently. And so that's why you're going to see betas are pretty unstable, because it depends on what systematic risk is impacting markets. Obviously, real estate's very sensitive to mortgage rates. Other industries aren't. So right now, everybody's talking about mortgage rates, so it has an impact. So every stock has some exposure to systematic risk, but at different levels. And it can be somewhat volatile depending on what's driving markets at the time. So in 2000, what stocks had the highest beta in 2000? Internet stocks, .com stocks. 2008, what stocks had the highest betas? Bank stocks, all right? Some insurance companies. So what has a higher beta, tech stocks or bank stocks? Well, is it 2000 or is it 2008? Kind of depends, right? Right now, there's inflation, shrinking margins, those kind of things have impacts. So beta is this relative measure. A stock with a high beta is going to be more cyclical, more tied to the industry. Low beta is more defensive. The range of beta is completely unlimited. And it's really not that hard to create a 1 million beta. You went out and borrowed $99,000 to invest $100,000 in call options, you're going to have a massive beta. You're going to be extremely exposed to the markets. But I generally keep betas between 0.4 and 3. So for paper 3, you're probably going to be in that 0.4 to 3 range. You're not going to go outside of it. Just part of the reason is if you go much lower than 0.4, you're not going to like what your paper 4 looks like. You can get some ridiculous valuations. But part of this is just strategizing. So there is something called a regression beta. Regression betas are incredibly unreliable because they're very sensitive to what time period you're looking at. So here's other professors that complain about my class. Why do you do it the way you do it? And so I find they can have different approaches. I'll show you how the other classes do it and why I don't like that approach. So we'll do it a little differently. But this is the most important thing right here. This is where I disagree with the other professors. Beta is not a calculation. It's not a number that you calculate using historical data. Beta is a forecast, just like everything else you do with stock valuations. Beta is a forecast. History is interesting. Same thing with growth, right? In paper 4, you got to figure out how fast your company is going to grow its earnings. Can you look at history for that? Yeah. Is that going to tell you the future? No. Is Valero going to grow as fast in the future as it is in the past? With everybody's driving EVs, maybe not. Maybe not because it's so lucrative. So historical growth helps you forecast future growth, but there's a lot more to it. Historical beta might help you interpret future beta, but not going to be 100%. Yahoo Finance will give you a beta using historical data, but that's not what you're going to use in paper 3. All right, so the second thing with unsystematic, I think we talked about that well enough. So unsystematic risk, that's specific to the company. So today, you saw Netflix up 16% when the market's down 2. That's kind of a huge impact on their beta. Once that gets into their beta numbers, it's going to radically change because beta is very sensitive to outliers. And if you have a day when the market's moving a lot and your stock's moving a lot, beta doesn't interpret that as unsystematic risk. They interpret that as systematic because you're both, and it may just be pure coincidence that Netflix is up 16 when the market's down 1, but beta doesn't know that. That's why beta is so unreliable. It's very sensitive to outliers and sometimes just random chance. So these are things that are specific to your company. We ignore them because you can eliminate them. I think we talked about HEB going public, and we already did the spreadsheet. So I've seen exam questions that say your company's beta is 1.1. The stock market's up 10%. How much is your stock up? And they want you to answer 11%, but that's the wrong answer. The answer is you have no clue. Because remember, beta is only 20% of the risk of the company. So just because your beta is 1.1 doesn't mean you're going to be up 11% when the market's up 10. You might have a tendency toward that, but you could be down 34% because you just announced some CEO retired. The podcast I was listening to on this, was it on the fuel company or another company? I listened to 2. I can't remember. I think it was the other company. They had a really, really good new CEO. He changed things and then he announced his retirement. The day he announced his retirement, the stock fell 10%. That'd be great. If you're a CEO and you love that, you quit and the stock drops 10%. I remember the guy from Microsoft, he quit and the stock was up 10%. That's not what you want. That'd be kind of depressing. So CEO leaving, those kind of things, a stock down 10%, that has nothing to do with their beta. And that's huge. So there's a lot of uncertainty. All right, so you're going to do a rolling beta. I'll show you how to do it in class. So when you forecast your beta in paper 3, first thing you do is figure out if your firm is cyclical or defensive. Now you can make your life easy by picking a company that's obviously cyclical or defensive. There's one company you can't pick, and that's Walmart, because that's the example company I'm doing. But what's the company you can pick that would be obviously cyclical or defensive? Oh? Costco.
No, Tesla.
Tesla would be cyclical, but you can't pick Tesla because their numbers are horrible. So it's just not going to work. I mean, you could, but you have a mess of numbers. So Tesla would be an obvious defensive company. Costco, yeah, Costco, grocery store. There aren't many grocery stores left. I think Albertsons just went public again. but there aren't many. The best grocery stores tend to be private right now. There's one private grocery store up on the East Coast that, boy, if they ever go public, I'm going to be interested in buying them. Pretty amazing firm. When I was up in the East, I was with friends. They said, we got to go grocery shopping, and we keep driving by grocery stores. And thinking, there's Food Lion, there's Giant. I said, no, we're going to this firm. Like 30 minutes. I was like, why? And they just loved us. Who would drive an extra 20, 25 minutes for grocery shopping? That's how much they liked it. I'm not, HEB, yeah, HEB, but if Walmart's 4 minutes faster, I'm gonna go Walmart. It's not that big. I like HEB, but not that much. So defensive or cyclical, Ford obviously high, Kroger's less so. That's going to be your starting point. And you're going to adjust that with 3 things. All right, so you start with that. You'll just write about that. What kind of firm do you have? Here's where I usually put industries, but some people would obviously debate with this. A lot of you in your exam question 1 had tech as kind of near 1. That's me saying that. Most people I would think of tech as above 1, like 1.2, 1.3. So I was just questioning that tech really fits. I'm not even sure if tech is an industry anymore. Google wasn't tech. Google's now media. Is Apple really tech? Isn't Apple a retail company? They sell a retail product. They sell phones and computers. Why does it have to be tech? HEB sells food, but they're consumer staples. They're not groceries. We don't have a grocery sector. Why do we have a tech sector? And I remember when 1-800-Flowers was a tech company. That sounds like a retail. Amazon, what used to be classified is Amazon a tech company? Well, you have their cloud services. That sounds tech, but is that really tech? That sounds like business to business, So tech may even disappear as an industry, but energy, I tend to think is kind of low to middling. Materials is obviously high beta. Industrials, obviously high. Communication services, it depends. They have telecom in there. Telecom is somewhat still thought about as being lower beta. But you can see my typical range on stocks. So it can range depending on the type of stock. Some are obvious. Consumer staples by definition. Utilities are low. Now, utilities are interesting because utilities tend to be high dividend paying stocks. High dividend paying stocks, some people view them as bond substitutes. Interest rates is a macro factor. Interest rates are up. Utilities usually struggle when interest rates are up. REIT stocks are high dividend paying stocks. When interest rates are up, they tend to do badly because people use them as bond substitutes. So even though utilities tends to be low beta, they're very sensitive to interest rates. And so they can have that macro factor that can cause problems. So right now the market's affected by higher interest rates. Utilities hate higher interest rates. So this low beta stock is probably selling off more than normal when the stock market's also selling off. All right, so the second thing you got to do is take that, whether it's cyclical or defensive, and start adjusting it for leverage. So the first leverage you're going to look at is operating leverage. How much fixed costs do they have? The more fixed costs a firm has, the more volatile its earnings going to be, the higher the beta. So in paper 3, you're going to talk subjectively about it. Look at their workforce. Is it salaried or is it hourly? Hourly tends to be more flexible. Salary tends to be more fixed. I mean, think about it. If you're NVIDIA, the last thing you want to do is lose employees, because that's your economic moat. If you lose employees, they're going to go to competitors. You're probably going to keep paying them almost no matter what. You want to keep them. If you're a pharmaceutical, say, hey, sorry, scientists, we're having a rough year, economy's down. We're going to lay you off. No, they're going to go work somewhere else. These are highly sought after people. So you're going to keep them no matter what. So that's going to have an impact. Union workforces tend to be much more fixed costs. You're kind of stuck with a lot of employee benefits and those type of things. You have a large pension plan. That's going to make you more fixed costs. PP&E, a lot of property, plant, and equipment. So if you're firm, you can go to Yahoo Finance, look at the balance sheet, and see how large their property, plant, and equipment is to their total assets. Firms with a lot of property, plant, and equipment tend to have more volatile earnings. Marketing campaigns, you think about a Nike and some retailers, they have a large market budget they spend every year no matter what, because their economic moat is their brand name. They've got to spend on that every year no matter what. They have no choice. How elastic is the demand for your product? If it's inelastic, so if their cost of goods sold goes up, they raise their price, they don't lose any customers. Like a cigarette can do that. Cigarettes can do that pretty well. Maybe alcohol a little bit. Right? The consumers are somewhat addicted to their product, so they're going to buy it no matter what. So that works somewhat like some of y'all in your iPhones, like even during class, are addicted. So Apple owns you. You are a smartphone zombie for the rest of your life. Your life is, as you know, it is over. You're stuck to that screen for the rest of your life. So inelastic, what are you going to do when your phone breaks? It's a disaster, right? You're going to go get it replaced as fast as you can because your life is over without that addiction. So those type of products, yeah, they can raise prices and keep selling. Any elastic demand, those companies, their incomes are going to be really, really volatile. Their prices, now Starbucks raised its prices with coffee prices. They usually do. How big is that to their cost? That's what you want to figure out. Is coffee 10% of the cost of goods sold or 70% of the cost of goods sold? Or is labor a bigger part? You'd want to understand that. Most people will understand if coffee prices go up, Starbucks can raise their prices. That's usually people aren't like, out protesting Starbucks raising their prices. McDonald's has raised its prices and they've somewhat have gotten away with that. I don't know why people go to McDonald's, but people still go to McDonald's even with higher prices because it's still pretty cheap food. So that's part of what you have to assess. If your firm needs to raise their prices because their cost of goods sold are going up, are they going to lose customers for that? If they're going to lose customers, they may just not raise their prices and their margins get strong. So either way, they're going to take a hit. Have y'all done some elasticity studies in your economics classes? So it's pretty complicated stuff. I've met with the math people at UTSA. They were going to do an elasticity study on auto insurance. I found that really, really fascinating. How much could UTSA raise its auto rates before it starts losing a lot of customers? How sticky is that? It's a little of a pain to change auto insurers, isn't it? You have to make some calls, you got to do some research. So a lot of people just stick with them. But at some point, if you're 10% higher than a State Farm, and I'll say people are going to move. So those type of studies, firms do those type of studies to try to figure out what price should they charge. So you want to think about that with your company as well. But the other way you could do it is actually look at the two margins and see how volatile they are. And based on that, you can determine how easy is it for them to pass higher cost of goods sold on to the customers. If they can pass it on, their margins should be really stable. If they can't pass it on, their margin's going to be fluctuating around. And then look at their net margin. How volatile is that? That's going to tell you how elastic the product is and also how much fixed cost they have. So it's going to be all in those numbers. So gross margin, net margins. Not all of your firms will have gross margins, although most of the firms I'm looking at do have gross margins. Sometimes airlines don't have gross margins. It depends on where you go. Yahoo Finance shows a gross margin for airlines. Bloomberg does not. So you have to kind of figure out what you're using. Sometimes real estate companies don't have gross margins. So I think most of the firms will have a gross margin. Gross margins are really, really important right now, especially for retail, like McDonald's and grocery stores because of the inflation. So I'll bring those gross margins in and you can look and see, did they hit or miss on gross margin? That's going to be a big part of the discussion in paper 2. So I'm going to come back to that. Let's talk real quick. The easy one, which is financial leverage. How much debt do they have? That one's really easy. You just look at their debt to equity and see how high that is or low that is versus the rest of the competitors. And then the last thing I'm going to do is history. So when you do paper 3, there's 3 numbers you have to do. The risk-free rate, which is now very, very easy. It used to be a lot harder, but now it's easy. The market risk premium, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that. And then your beta. And then on your beta, you're gonna have this 4-step process: revenue, operating leverage, financial leverage, and history. They'll do those 4 things. So let me show you how we're gonna do operating leverage. So I'm going to put, I think I put this file out there already on Canvas. So what I do with this file is I should only have 500 companies, but I have almost 3,000 companies. So I did the Russell 3000. The reason I should have done 500 is beta is usually against S&P 500. It's not against the Russell 3000, but I wanted more companies, so I did it that way. So we had 3,000 companies, and I brought in their gross margins the last 21 years, their net margins, and their debt to equity. And so my theory is firms with high operating margins, high operating leverage will have very volatile margins. So that's my theory. So let's try that. So what you want to do with this file is first go find your company. Let me do Costco. How volatile do you think Costco's margins are? Pretty stable. Here's their gross margin. 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. Anybody want to guess? 12. Getting up to 13, 12, 13, 12, 12, 13. Pretty stable. What about their net margins? 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 2.5, 3, 3. If you had to forecast Costco, what would you forecast for their net margin? Do you think they manage the 3%? They do, right? And it's a pretty interesting firm. If they find ways to save costs, what do? They cut prices. They manage that 3%. The CEO of Costco actually says, our goal is to make as little money as possible. They want their margins to be small. They're trying to cut costs as much as they can, not to give it to stockholders, but to give it to their customer. Why do they do that? Because they want to crush competition. They want to be so much cheaper than everybody else they can't catch up. I love that. That's a great company, isn't it? How do they make money? They make money on turnover. They want customers, and they're going to give you the best deal they can. That's a great company. I love it. It's a great philosophy, and they do everything they can. I mean, their stores or their warehouses. That's pretty good. They have a limited SKUs, so they don't have to deal with a lot of suppliers.
Yeah, it's like one building profit like per year, and like 95% of that is
Yeah, the membership fee is a pretty good addition to that. That's something you could certainly talk about with Costco and giving them some stability as well. So the membership fee might be more than the 3%. They may make more off the membership because that's a very high margin business, right? It doesn't cost them that much to take in the membership fee. And they have incredibly loyal members. So there's the standard deviation of their net margin. You notice any other companies that might have a higher standard deviation? That looks like a pretty high standard deviation, doesn't it? Why? Because they had a negative 1,000% margin. That's a pretty bad margin. How do you bring in $10 in revenue and have a loss of whatever, $1 million? I don't know what company that is. I don't know who that is, but if you look at Tesla, Tesla actually had not a negative net margin. Tesla actually had a negative gross margin. That's really hard to do. But how much money are you going to make if you cost you $100 to make something and you sell it for $80? Can you make that up in volume? It's kind of tough, right? A negative gross margin is pretty horrible. They're getting a lot better here recently. Their net margin, negative 109,000%. That's a pretty bad net margin. And then they got really, really good the next year. Good improvement, but no earnings. Finally, their first year of earnings, and now they're really kicking it pretty well. They're still making money. Now that 16% net margin is a phenomenal margin for auto. So for auto manufacturers, they are doing a whole lot better than competition, and they're expanding out. But their issue is turnover, right? They got to be able to build more cars to sell them. So if I look at Costco, they're on line 653. So I'm going to bring Costco in here. So be careful on paper 3. This is not their gross margin. This is the standard deviation of the gross margin. And if you're not sure, JJ, Beverly, Brandon can explain it to you. They saw it last semester and they remember it extremely well. So the standard deviation of a typical stock's gross margin is 3.9%. For Costco, it's 0.3%. So they rank in the top 2% of those 3,000 companies. That's pretty stable gross margin. And then their net margin, you expect net margins to be more volatile than gross margins because you have all those fixed costs and all that other stuff. For the Russell 3000, it's 7.6% standard deviation. For Costco, it's 0.3%. They're one of the most stable companies out there. Very, very predictable. The market loves that. It makes them a low beta company. Because what's their margin in a recession? 3%. What's their margin in a strong economy? 3%. What does that tell you for beta? Pretty unrelated. Now their turnover may move around. They may actually go up in a recession. People may buy more stuff from them in a recession. So if you look at some other companies, let's try I can't spell Carnival. 509. So some companies are kind of surprising, but Carnival's gross margin, how volatile is that? Pretty volatile. Now 2020 might have really messed that number up. I don't know if you've ever tried to manage a business where the revenues falls 90% in 1 year. That's kind of a bad year, don't you think? It's like, well, our revenue down 90% this year, but other than that, we're doing pretty well. That doesn't sound right. And their net margins, 89%. That could all just be 2020 because it's such a horrible year, but very, very volatile. Why? Because they have these massive ships. They're very expensive to run. You have to hire a lot of people on those boats, whether you fill up the boat or not. A lot of fuel costs, right? So there's a lot going on with those firms. We can see if 2020 was the big problem there. Those are pretty bad net margins, aren't they? They go from pretty consistent until there then though, right? 16, 18, 16, 17, 15, 100, 158%. That's a pretty good drop in net margin all in 1 year, and then negative 371. Now they're doing pretty well. I don't know if you have noticed. I don't know why, people are going on cruises again. I guess they weren't bored enough, and so they say, hey, we're just not bored enough. Let's get on a boat where we can't go do anything but play cards for 6 hours. Our lives are just far too adventuresome. But people are doing cruises again. All right. And then the second thing is the debt. How much debt do they have? This one's pretty straightforward. The typical stock's debt to equity is 63%. Carnival's is 507%. That's pretty high debt level. They're in the top 5% for highest debt. So a Carnival, step one, revenue. What kind of company is it? Cyclical or defensive? Cyclical. Operating leverage, very, very high operating leverage. Financial leverage, very, very high financial leverage. What's your beta going to be for this company? Close to 2, definitely above 1.5, maybe above 2. You have to look at some of the history. But yeah, this is a high beta stock. Pretty obvious. Just because it's travel and leisure, that just sounds cyclical to begin with. But then you add in these other factors, you say, wow, this is a really dangerous stock. How did it do today? Down 2%, 2.5%. That's one day. You can't really do beta in one day, but yeah, it's down more than the market. That sounds like a high beta stock, but kind of expected. But if you look, I mean, it's had some pretty good comeback in here recently. So interesting stock. If you go back 5 years, can you see 2020 in there? Kind of stands out, doesn't it? Kind of obvious. People aren't going to get on a boat in the middle of a pandemic. Well, except for the people that got on the boat because of the pandemic, because they were trapped there. All right, so that's going to be your paper 3. So you're going to do those 4 steps on beta, and you come up with a beta. And one thing you can really enhance your paper with, especially on debt to equity, is do more than one company, because debt to equity is very industry specific. So your firm might have had, let's say you do utility. You do like Duke Utility, Duke Energy. They're going to look like you have high debt, but all utilities have high debt, and it's okay. So that may temper how much you push up their beta because of their high debt, because that's that industry. Tech stocks don't have high debt. Tech stocks have low debt. So if you have a firm that's a tech stock that has average debt versus the Russell 3000, that's going to be high for tech stocks. So you want to compare to some competitors to see. All right, we'll stop it there.